third drug to either enhance the first or to reduce the negative side effects of the first drug. And in relation to specific user groups, we heard presentations on a worrying increase in alcohol and benzodiazepine combined use in the northeast of England, and also looking at methamphetamine and GBL use amongst gay users in and around the London clubbing scene. What's clear in relation to all of this is how widespread polydrug use is amongst users, but also the concerns of greatly increased risks in terms of acute toxicity, overdose and so on. So we're trying to chart some of the more popular but also some of the more dangerous combinations. As Les said, it's really almost infinite, but we're trying to work our way through those, and in the process of gathering evidence on what are those key combinations and the implications, particularly because I think in the drugs field we've tended to look at individual drugs in isolation just because it's easier to manage. So we're trying to tackle this head on at the moment, but it is a challenging area. I've been to evidence gathering at a crack and polydrug use project last month, the Blenheim project in London, and next month I'm going to evidence gathering at London Friend, looking at polydrug use amongst gay, lesbian, bisexual groups. And our next meeting is also next month in November.
We're going to deal with another of the major agenda items, a review of cocaine. David Little's chairing that. David, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, the ACA convened a working group to carry out a thorough review of the harms associated with cocaine and provide recommendations for tackling these. The ACM review process is likely to take around 12 months, and the final report will not advise on the classification of cocaine, since the ACMD believes that cocaine is and should remain a Class A drug. The review will cover powder cocaine and crack. We've had 2 meetings so far, one in June and one recently in September, and we've made excellent progress so far. If I just cover the key areas that we'll be looking at, firstly chemistry, pharmacology and toxicology, then physical and social harms, prevalence and frequency of cocaine use. We're also looking at having an overview of current policy strategy and delivery. Enforcement and criminal justice issues we'll look at, and the cocaine trade, and also purity and contaminants. We'll also look at service and treatment and recovery issues, and we plan to visit a number of services. We've already visited one service for older crack users, and we intend to undertake other visits. We'll also be looking at the challenges around education and prevention, and finally we're hoping to look at future trends, and obviously linking with the work of the Polysubstance Use Working Group as well to ensure synergy with their work. In terms of the review process, as well as gathering the evidence through the working group meetings, the ACMD will convene a special meeting in December to consider and discuss the evidence to inform their recommendations and to government. That meeting is planned for the 1st of December, and the evidence gathering meeting will be held in public session. Experts and stakeholders external to the ACMD will be invited to give presentations where relevant, and subsequent written evidence. Much of the evidence gathering will be in a public meeting, and there will be private sessions to consider restricted evidence for the Council to review the evidence and discuss its recommendations. The review will, as I said, commenced in June, and we're hoping to conclude our work in the spring next year.
Right, so this is an agenda item generated by ACMD itself. Our agenda is partly in response to ministerial requests, but we also have the freedom to set certain agenda items up ourselves, and we did that for cocaine, largely because we were concerned about the increase in cocaine use in this country over the past decade, about a 3-fold increase. And we're also concerned about the misconception that powder cocaine is somehow a safe drug, whereas crack cocaine isn't. I believe cocaine of any sort is a dangerous drug, and we believe one of the results of this review will be some public health message to say that this isn't a safe dinner party drug. I'm going to ask Hugh Matheson, however, to talk about the CAT review. This, just to give you the history of this, the ACMD did review cat, which is the chewed twigs of a shrub, comes from East Africa and contains a naturally occurring amphetamine-like substance. In 2005, we reviewed the pharmacology and chemistry and the use of this substance and came to the conclusion that it was an important part of the tradition in the Somali, Ethiopian immigrant communities, and we were not ready to order that this vegetable substance be banned. However, we've now been asked to review that decision again 6 years later in the light of some quite intense lobbying by certain members of these communities. This is not indeed a safe practice, but has a number of adverse side effects. So, Hugh, tell us what we're going to do.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's set the background very clearly. We intend to consider whether cat should be classified under the Misuse of Drugs Act, whether we should recommend that. We want to look at the prevalence of cat use. It's interesting to note that it's estimated about 60 tonnes a week is brought into this country. Identify the key cat using populations. Identify and quantify harms associated with cat use specifically in response to the lobbying we've had, the social harms, and develop an understanding of responses to cat use, the services and public information campaigns. Consider the nature of the trade, including the international trafficking which may go on from here, and follow up recommendations in the 2005 report. There's a short paper before you, and I'll be pleased to have any comments. There's a huge amount of work been going on, as has just been demonstrated by the previous report, so we've had to wait nearly a year for this to come to the top of the agenda, but we're moving forward from today, so any comments in the paper, either now or in the next day or two following the meeting, would be greatly appreciated.
I think you've made the point that this is a subject that we've committed to, but we haven't been able to act on because of the limited resources that we have available. We can only handle a certain number of projects at any one time, and this one has had to wait, and will start right now in the autumn.
Hello, this is Leo Barassi at the UK Drug Policy Commission. I've got two questions on the novel psychoactive substances report. First, it was mentioned that future work on new psychoactives should include measuring whether users are switching from old and potentially more dangerous substances to the new substances. Do you intend then also to take this into account with future advice? Second question is, what is your view on the enforcement agency's capacity to enforce controls over a rapidly growing number of substances?
Well, the first part of your question is very germane, because we did have this discussion with ministers on Thursday last week, and it is a question, I think Fiona would agree, it's a question that can be answered, whether the young people using legal highs are indeed a new group of drug users, or are they switching from some other legal. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, the first thing to say is we don't have very much research, but from some of the early studies that myself and colleagues have been involved with, it appears that the novel psychoactive substances have been added to existing repertoires of experienced drug users, as opposed to either displacing them or bringing new users in. But that's something that we're still at the early stages of understanding.
I think, as ever, in terms of enforcement agencies, there will always be more crime that can be investigated. What we need to look at is the scale of the response, and the scale of the response against substances, illegal substances, in this case, can be seizure, just seizure alone at a border, ranging from anything then to a full criminal justice system aspect. And law enforcement agencies will need to look at the priorities that they have at the time, the amount of work that they have at any particular time, and also the priorities that are set by government. So in relation to soccer, the Home Secretary herself actually sets our priorities, and that dictates how much effort we would put into any particular area.
Just from the policing perspective, of course, the infiltration aspects are a critical element around it, but also the fact that certain things suddenly become regulated in the Misuse of Drugs Act means that the white powders that we stop people with will
get forensically examined and will result in different sanctions or outcomes than they currently would. And likewise, one of the big problems with methadone was, of course, it was creating an awful lot of antisocial behaviour type activity locally. It's another element in terms of the problem solving at the time, and if methadone had been classified what it was in its early stages of becoming a problem, then clearly there would have been another option for local safe neighbourhood teams or others to deal with at that time. So I think it helps in many ways.
Sarah Graham, independent addiction therapist. It was certainly my experience and the experience of my colleagues that methadone was being used by young people who hadn't previously used an illegal substance and certainly had never snorted a drug in the way that they were snorting methadone. I think it also posed real problems to schools in terms of substances being brought into the school playground that were legal and yet obviously had enormous potential to be used in ways that it wasn't suggested on the packaging, but which could cause problems to pupils and schools.
And I think we have to recognise the enormous problem faced by the police and the border agency and anyone else in trying to control legal highs that come in the form of white powders. And the white powder may come to Heathrow in a package labelled something innocuous like vitamin C. In fact, contains one or other of the legal highs. Says this is a very tough problem. I attended the Association of Chief Police Officers Drugs Conference recently, and there I get the impression that police are really up against how to identify these substances. If they take the trouble to send the white powder off for analysis, that's going to cost quite a lot of money. And many police, I think, are just saying we can't afford to monitor this at the level we'd like to do, and that's unfortunate because the analysis of new substances, these are new chemical problems that have to be solved, and these are not techniques that are generally available nationally at the moment.
My name is Abu Karawale. I'm here to represent an organization called Somali Diaspora UK. And firstly, I just quick comment on Chair's remarks with regards and CAT, which is the council seen as a important part of East African cultures. We have many cultures which we are very proud of and take a very pride of. CAT, unfortunately, it's not one of them. It's a bad habit. In the current climate, CAT is and for us, it's an obstacle for integration for us. It's segregating us, the wider society, and young people are failing from schools and finding themselves in the wrong side of the law, and the current climate and the world where we are living now. And we strongly believe to have so many young Somalis in the street who are intoxicated on this drug will not be helpful to wider society. My question is, and I just would like to understand, and cathinol and caffeine are both substances which are controlled. When you add them together and combine them together and they are cut, they are still legal in this country. How did the council come to that conclusion?
I wasn't involved in the 2005 report, but my understanding is that a number of people persuaded the people who were doing the review that this was an important part of the culture. I think the working group I'm going to chair will come to this with a fresh mind, and if I can catch you before you go away at the end of the public session, I'll get you details and we can perhaps talk with you further.